Good evening. Still doing these in the evenings. We have been going through, I've been going through the book of Judges in chapter 6. We've been going through the story of Gideon. And I have now done 2 videos on this. We're about to start the 3rd. And I thought about going all the way through the end of chapter 6. It's not the end of the story of Gideon, but I thought about going all the way to the end. I don't think I'm going to make it there. You might be happy for that. You might not. I don't know. Might be like, get it over with. But regardless, I'm going to start. We left off with the end of verse 24 last time. I'm going to pick up at 25. Probably make it down through, I think, verse 32. So not that long of a section. We'll see how long this goes. But just as a recap, Gideon is one of the judges in the book of Judges. He was what I would call almost a frightened judge or a scared judge. He kept asking for a sign, and we're going to sort of see that as we go through. Israel is currently being oppressed by the Midianites and the Amalekites, or the Amalekites, and the children of the east. So there's 3 groups that have been coming and going through the land of Israel. They have been eating all their crops. They've been driving their cattle across all their crops and having that all go away that way. So Israel is currently crying out to God. As I said in the first video, there was a prophet that God sent to the people of Israel to say, I told you, I'm the God that brought you out of Egypt, and I told you not to serve the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you will dwell. And exactly what he told them not to do is what they have done, and that's sort of what we're going to be walking through a little bit tonight. I might as well get started. Enough talking. So, chapter 6, Judges chapter 6, verse 25. And it came to pass the same night that the Lord said unto him, Take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock of 7 years old. And I'm actually going to stop there. Just to be clear, this is 2 different bullocks. The young bullock, your father's young bullock, and this is King James I'm reading, but if you read another version, it'll basically say, and a second bullock of 7 years old. So, young one and a 7-year-old. Now, I don't know if there's any significance to this, but Israel, if you read the beginning of this chapter, has actually been under the oppression of the Midianites for 7 years. 7-year-old bullock, 7 years of oppression. It's an interesting little thing. I don't know if there's anything to it, but he specifies it needs to be, the second bullock needs to be a 7-year-old. It says, Take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock of 7 years old, and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath cut down, so throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down the grove that is by it. Now, King James uses the word grove. If you look like over at one of the other versions, like the NASB, 1995, it uses the word Asherah. If you look at the Hebrew, it actually uses the word Asherah, or Asherah, for this, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. But if you know anything with the times that we're in, there were several gods of the Canaanites. You have Baal, that's the one that everyone always thinks of. You have Asherah, which is actually a goddess of the Canaanites, a goddess of fertility and of basically crops, like good produce. So they have 2 gods that are being represented here, and this is his father's. It actually says this is the grove that is his father's, and the altar that is his father's. So his own father, and I guess probably him too, were in the process of serving these false gods that God previously told them do not serve, do not go to. He actually says that earlier in the chapter through the prophet. And then if you go back to Exodus, I know last time I basically said that Moses told them not to serve other gods, not to go after that. He specifies, and he actually specifies exactly what Gideon was told to do. So in Exodus chapter, let me see if I find it again. Here we go. Chapter 34, and it says in verse 13, But rather you are to tear down their altars, and smash their sacred pillars, and cut down their Asherim. Asherim here, the Asherah. It's that pole that represents the goddess of fertility and of crops and harvest. So it's funny that the Israelites were worshiping a goddess of harvest at a time where they really couldn't actually keep a harvest. The Midianites were coming in, and God was allowing them to ravage their lands. So they were praying to the wrong God for what they wanted. All this, going back, we're in verse 26. All right, so we just had him being told by God to go and cut down the grove and to tear down the altar of Baal. It says, verse 26, and build an altar unto the Lord thy God upon the top of this rock in the ordered place, and take the second bullock and offer a burnt sacrifice with the wood of the grove, or of the Asherah, which thou shalt cut down. So he's basically saying, tear down the altar to Baal, cut down the Asherah poles, which are to the false goddess, and use those poles, use the wood from those, to have a burnt offering to God. So it says, then Gideon took 10 men of his servants, and did as the Lord had said unto him. So we've already got the fact that Gideon first asked God. He asked the messenger of the Lord, or the angel of the Lord, which was the pre-incarnate Christ. He said, give me a sign that you are talking with me, that this isn't just my imagination or anything else. And that's when God basically told him to bring the gift that he wanted to bring, and he went and did it. And the messenger of the Lord burnt up the sacrifice, burnt up the offering that was brought to him, the gift from Gideon. Now, Gideon is actually just going ahead and doing. God told him that same night to go out and do this, and he has gone out. He took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had said unto him. And so it was because he feared his father's household and the men of the city that he could not do it by day, that he did it by night. Throughout the story of Gideon, we see two things happening. We see Gideon asking for a sign, and we see Gideon being fearful. God is patient, and God is so patient with us. It's not just Gideon. We do the same thing. But God is patient with him. He's patient with us, and he constantly gave him his signs. Whenever Gideon would ask for a sign, God would give it to him. And whenever Gideon was fearful, God would give him a reason not to be. So Gideon was willing to obey God, but he was only willing to do it at night. He took 10 men of his father's household, so it wasn't just him doing it. He had other people there with him, and he tore down the altar to Baal. He cut down all the Asherah, and he built an altar, and he sacrificed the ox, or sacrificed the bullock that he brought with him. So he does all this, and then he runs off. He doesn't stick around to get caught. Obviously, he didn't want to get caught in the first place. He did it at nighttime. So it says, and when the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was cast down, and the grove, or the Asherah, was cut down that was by it, and the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. They went out to worship in the morning, obviously not worshiping the one true God. And when they got there, they realized that there was an altar to the one true God, and everything that they had been worshiping up to this point was gone. They weren't happy. There's so many things in our lives that we almost lift up as an idol. We almost lift up as something that we worship. And I know we don't think we do. There are things that we give our time to. There's things that we spend all of our focus on. I mean, whether it's I want to be really great at my job. That's good. It's good. Work heartily as if unto the Lord. We're supposed to do our best, but we raise it up and we're like, the job is the important thing. I've got these other obligations, but I'm going to be the best employee ever. And our focus on God falls away. Our focus on the family that God has given us, that we need to be actually taken care of, falls away, and we've lifted up an idol. It could be sports. I don't follow sports, so I'm really not the one to talk on this. But, I think we know the things that we are fans of, fanatical about, are things that we've lifted up. And whether we've lifted it up above God or lifted it up equal to God, or it's just right below, there's so much focus that we put on certain things in our lives that is not God. And with that, we've built up our own little grove. We've built up our own little Asherah. No, we're not sitting there praying to it. No, we're not sitting there, offering sacrifices to it, except we do in a way. We offer a sacrifice of our time. We offer a sacrifice of our money. We buy paraphernalia. We, spend everything we can on this type of thing. So the things that we become fanatical about, we have almost created our own little altar to Baal, our own little Asherah grove. And it's very easy to do. And if it ever gets taken away from us, whether it's by our own choice or by somebody else's, it hurts, and it also just makes us upset. So let's just say you come home one day and you've had a long day at work, and you come home to just like you're wanting to watch TV or something, and you look, and right there on the wall is a broken TV because your kid accidentally threw something and it went into it. Well, is your reaction going to be, oh, okay, it's just TV? No, you're probably going to get upset because you were looking forward to the enjoyment you would have gotten from that and the time that you would have spent with that. And yeah, now you're going to have to spend all the money to replace it because you've got to have it. I'm not saying that you can't have a TV. I'm not saying that you can't watch your TV, but what is it you're giving your focus to? What is it you're giving your time to? And is the stuff that you're watching on the TV actually honoring to God, or is it just something that is, there's very little that's put out by Hollywood that actually is something that God would be happy with, like, if we're being honest with it. So what is it you give your time to? What is it you focus on? What is it that you worship? And is there a grove? Is there an Asherah? Is there a idol in your life that needs to be torn down? I'll keep on going though with this. So the men of the city said it says, and they said one to another, who hath done this thing? We're in verse 29. Who hath done this thing? And when they inquired and asked, they said, Gideon the son of Joash hath done this thing. So we know Gideon did it at night. We know that Gideon took 10 men. I think we can surmise from this that not all of those 10 men were loyal to him at the end of it. And when people started asking the tough questions, they didn't want to take the blame, so they pointed the finger. Nobody else would have known about this, so he could have gone and done this by himself, and then there would have been no one to actually point that finger back at him. Maybe it was too much work for him. Maybe it was like too physical for him to actually do all that, cut down all the Asherah poles, tear down the altar. Maybe it was just too much for him to do that on his own. But because he decided he wanted to take backup, that backup actually sort of ratted him out at the end of it. That, not a spiritual lesson in that, but it's just sort of funny. Says, then the men of the city said unto Joash. Now we know from early in the chapter who is Joash. Joash is Gideon's father. He was also the person that the grove belonged to and that the idol or the altar to Baal belonged to. And so they came to his dad and they said, bring out thy son that he may die, because he hath cast down the altar of Baal, and because he hath cut down the grove that was by it. And Joash said unto all that stood against him, will ye plead for Baal? Will ye save him? He that will plead for him, let him be put to death whilst it is yet morning. If you're gonna, he got forced to take a stand himself. So he had these idols himself. And his son is sitting here on the line, on the chopping block, and he has to actually make a choice. Joash knows that from what he's seen, there is no value in Baal. It's been made very clear. So what he's telling these people is, you think Baal is a god. Okay. If you think that, why is it that you have to do something to intervene for him? What is it that you have to do to help him? Is he so weak that he needs you to help him take vengeance on my son who tore down his altar? And if you're going to contend for him, then you better be willing to put your life on the line. That person who's going to fight for Baal and contend for him, they can die this morning, right here, right now, and we're going to do this. The men, I'm guessing, would have backed down a little bit because Joash made some good points and he put his sword on the line along with everything else. He says, I will put to death anyone here who contends for Baal. This is a big turn because he had this altar, he had this Asherah growth, and now he is actually changed. Now, he got brought to this point not because he was just thinking one day and he's like, oh, you know what? I don't think there's really anything to Baal. He actually got brought to this point because he had to make a choice. You know, the Joshua in the previous book, at the end of the book, said, you know, choose you this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He actually said it out there and he made a choice. Joash has been living the easy way of just, you know, following after what everyone else in the land did. That's what Moses warned them about. If you go in here and you leave these people in the land, you will start to pursue their gods. You need to go in there and tear down their idols. That's what you need to do. You need to remove this, because having those idols there, having the people there that worship the other gods, was going to become a temptation to them to follow after that. You see what they're doing? They don't have any crops. They don't have any food. And so they're worshiping the Asherah, which is a goddess of fertility and a goddess of harvest. And so they're looking to this Asherah instead of looking to God. They previously cried out to God earlier in the chapter, but they didn't repent. They're still sitting here with their idols. They did not repent. They didn't turn from their sins. They just cried out to God thinking, hey, we'll cry out to a God. One of them's going to hear us, because they're obviously trying to go in the morning to worship these ones. Nothing's changed to this point. But then Joash actually had to make a change. He had to make a decision. And this is his moment where he's like, as for me and my house, we're going to serve Yahweh. We're going back to God. And these idols, if they were real, when my son went to tear them down, they wouldn't have let him. But he couldn't, this God, Baal, could not do anything about it. It's the same thing we see later on when we've got Elijah on Mount Carmel. And he's just sitting there mocking the prophets of Baal. He's like, you know, your God hasn't sent fire yet. Maybe he's gone to the bathroom. Maybe he's on a trip. Maybe he's sleeping. And he's mocking them because there is no truth to their God. There is nothing there that can help them. And so the things, I'll finish out. So plead for Baal. So if he be a god, let him plead for himself, because one hath cast down his altar. Therefore on that day he called him Jerubbaal. That's actually saying they called Gideon Jerubbaal, saying, let Baal plead against him, because he hath thrown down his altar. So Gideon got a nickname out of this. This is the verse where I'm going to go ahead and stop. The next section is where Gideon lays out the fleece. I want that to be in its own section when we get to it. But Gideon got his nickname, you know, Jerubbaal, let Baal plead for himself. And it almost looks like, you know, he was brave in this situation, but I mean, I think we can see going through, there was no courage, but there was obedience. He obeyed, but he obeyed in the safest way possible when it came to obeying God. He did it at night, and that still, God didn't really give him the chance of not owning up to it. He had to make a stand for God. And what I would say for our side of it, if we go over to the New Testament and we go to the book of Matthew. Matthew, let me see if I'm going to find this. Oh, I knew I should have marked these better when I was doing it. All right, so in Matthew 10, I'm just going to give you the verse because I've got it roughly memorized. But in Matthew 10, Jesus says that if we will confess him before men, he will confess us before his Father who is in heaven. If we will deny him before men, he will deny us before his Father who is in heaven. We don't get the option of taking a back seat if we are followers of Christ. If we have surrendered to him, if we have come to him and given our lives to him, we have actually confessed him. That's actually part of what the whole aspect of water baptism is. It doesn't save you, but you are actually using it as an outward sign to show that you have given yourself to Christ. That you, after you have been saved, have actually said, I identify with him. Gideon and his father had to choose who they were going to identify with, who they were going to side with. They could have sided with Baal and Gideon could have refused to obey God. Now Gideon did, right before this, get to see God burn up the gift that he brought. And so I think if you're looking at, well, this one's real, this one's not, he had proof of who he was following. But we have to be willing to actually take a stand ourselves. We have to be willing to side with God in everything in our lives. So if you go over to the book of James, I know I'm hopping around here a little bit. If you go to James chapter 4, I'll actually just read verse 4 because this is the one I'm after, but it says, "You adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God?" We're basically, and when I say friendship with the world, there's a system of this world, a system of sin. God has set out his law. He has told us what we are to do. And this world and its ruler have rebelled against everything with that. When we side with the world, when we side with the things that we like in the world, the things that we enjoy, we can't do without, the sins in our lives, everything with it, when we side with that, we're going against God. And that's enmity. That is basically trying to make an enemy of God. We can't claim Christ while holding on to the world. We actually have to make a choice. Gideon couldn't go and I'm going to tear down most of the Asherah poles. I'll tear most of them down. I'll leave one. I don't want to fully tear down the altar to Baal. I'm going to leave it a little bit standing. That way he's not mad at me. Like, we can't cling. When Christ sets us free, we're set free from the bondage of sin. But so often we try to hold on to what we've been set free from. We try to turn back and grab onto it and try to take it along with us. It doesn't work that way. We have to repent of our sins and turn to Christ fully. I'm going to stop roughly there for tonight. So we've covered Judges chapter 6. We've gone all the way down now through verse 32. Thank you for being patient with me as we've been going through this very slowly. But that's where we'll stop for tonight. Just think, is what I would ask you. Just think of what it is in your life that you have placed either above God, that you have placed on par with God, or even just below him, that you've given so much of your time and your thought to. And just think, do I need this in my life? Is this drawing me closer to God? Am I getting closer because of this? Or is this actually pulling me away from him? Am I giving up some of what belongs to him by going after this? So, and I need to do the same thing. I know there are things in my life that it's like, I don't need this. And God is very good at cutting out the things out of our lives, if we'll let him, that we really don't need, and replacing it with him. So that's it for tonight. Thank you for listening. I hope you guys have a good night.